While many pieces of evidence can be used to point to the reality of Jesus' resurrection, we will focus on 3.
What is up, heathens? How are you guys doing today? So tonight we're going to be going over evidence for Jesus being resurrected. Now, this doesn't just come from random internet user 123. Apparently, this is a pure historian that teaches at a school. You know, the kind that historicists like to throw in my face that they have on their side. I got a historicist that is working at a college and meets all the criteria, but are arguing for the resurrection of a dead human. So, let's see what they got here. All right, a hand. Well, that's a good start, I guess. I think it's going to be one of those drawing things on a board where they try to make.
Boston University.
She Boston University historian. Since it's in Boston, we know that it's legit as shit, right?
I know in their own terms what they saw was the raised Jesus. That's what they say, and then all the historical evidence we have afterwards attests to their conviction that that's what they saw.
Okay, having a severe conviction to something isn't proof that it actually happened, though. I could have a severe conviction that I myself am God, and act accordingly. That doesn't make me really God. It just makes it a very convincing delusion to me.
I'm not saying that they really did see the raised Jesus.
Oh, thank God!
I don't know what they saw, but I know that as a historian, they must have seen something.
Okay, so to say that they must have seen something, you're tacking on a whole bunch of assumptions here. You're assuming that Jesus actually existed. That's one thing, but we'll give you that assumption for right now since we're arguing for the resurrection of a Jesus. Another thing that you're assuming is that the biblical accounts are in no way made up or falsified. I'm not saying that you're assuming that they are completely falsified or completely made up, but at least these resurrection accounts are somehow based on eyewitness testimony. And we know for a fact that they weren't. The authors of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, we don't know who they are, and it's actually provable to say that they were changed throughout history to tack on some things. Like Mark, it has an extended ending, and then you've got a lot of different changes in Matthew and Luke, and then John is just far out left field. That was from the crazy conservative group of Christians in the first century. So, I mean, you're tacking on a lot of assumptions saying they must have seen something. They didn't see anything because we don't know if they even existed to see it. We don't have anything actually placing them into the history at that point.
Is there any reason to believe that an extraordinary event like the resurrection actually happened? We might be encouraged to know that since the first Christians made...
I will say... I will quote Hitchens' razor at this point. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And you have no extraordinary evidence for this. You have bullshit religious books.
The claim that the resurrection was Jesus' physical body coming to life and leaving an actual literal tomb, as opposed to simply a spiritual belief that Jesus had come back again as a ghost or was alive in their hearts as a memory.
Okay, so... this part right here I want to address because that's not exactly true. The closest account that we can have really is Paul. He's that guy who was on the road to, I believe, Damascus and to crucify or kill some Christians because, in the ancient world, that's just what you did with the Christians. Shoved a pole up their ass, lit them on fire to, have dinner by. But Paul, he saw this vision of Jesus, and then he goes and he turns into a Christian, and voila, he starts preaching the gospel, right? The authors of the gospels that we have now are they were written way after Paul. So the closest reference in the Bible, of course, is Paul. He did actually write those particular letters. Some of them he had, a scribe do it because he had poor eyesight getting on into his later years. But, we can really look to Paul to get some good indication as to what these first Christians believed. And what you find is that Paul never actually saw Jesus on earth, albeit he does talk like he was on earth, but he never actually was on earth. Paul sees a revelation of Jesus, and then he uses scriptures, which would be the Septuagint, the Torah, various Jewish books and legends and whatnot. He used those as scriptures, and his revelation of Jesus. The revelation of Jesus would be a hallucination, or him seeing the spiritual Jesus. So it is definitely a ghost that comes back and tells him about all this stuff, at least a ghost to him. So it wasn't that there was a man physically resurrected or anything like that. It's just that, and this is Paul's theology, any apostle, any of these first apostles saw the risen Christ and in celestial form, and that is the only reason why they are apostles. So
it can be studied in the same way other historical events can be, like Hannibal's invasion, complete with the elephants, Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, or the Broncos being crushed by the Seahawks in Super Bowl 48.
No, we don't have as good of evidence for that we do for those things. We don't have that at all. Best we have are religious texts that have been forged throughout the years, and then we have some extra biblical texts that either just relay Christian beliefs, or they've been forged later on after Jesus has been established or Christianity has been established.
Historical research is well respected, even though, unlike scientific research, you cannot place historical events under a microscope or contain them to a lab.
Well, true, you cannot you cannot look through a general scientific lab and reveal history. But what you can do is look at the evidence. You can quantify the evidence and you can examine the evidence. See, that's why the scientific method still works in this case, because what you're doing is you're quantifying the evidence that you find. Since science works on, I believe it's, is it deduction? It uses both deduction and induction in order to figure things out. And that's what history does too. You have to deduce and induce, things by looking at the effects around it. And that's just how I understand it in a nutshell.
Historians put reports together from written sources and eyewitnesses or anything else that was known from the time and place of the events to reach reasonable conclusions about what may have actually happened.
Okay, that would be a good point, with the exception that the only sources we have really are in the Bible. And a minimal historian minimal historicist would say that, well, he just wasn't well known enough. That's a fair point. But you have all of these other people, right, that would have taken notice of him. Like Philo, he would have taken notice. He was a Jewish historian. He wrote about several different Jewish sects. He wrote down several failed messiahs. If Jesus was as big as it says in the Bible, Philo would have definitely known about him, but he didn't. If he was a very, very small, account or whatnot, then I still think that you would find more in history. You have all these people that forge things, like 2 Peter is a completely forged book in the Bible that was forged in Paul's name, and what it does is forges an actual experience with Jesus Christ. And we know that to be a forgery. Just like in Josephus, that one little blurb about Jesus, that's a forgery. There's just nothing in history to actually cement him in history. So people like to bring up Socrates and whatnot. Well, you see, what we have are people quoting Socrates after. We don't have any direct sources from Socrates, but we know that he existed because other people were writing about him. And we just don't have that for Jesus.
While many pieces of evidence can be used to point to the reality of Jesus' resurrection, We will focus on 3. Number 1, the early church exploded on the scene of the ancient world with the claim that Jesus had risen from the dead as their central proclamation. Many movements are gradual in building momentum, and when it comes to larger-than-life, legendary, or miraculous characteristics claimed by these movements about their leaders, those ideas usually take decades and sometimes even centuries to develop. From what we know about Christianity, the claim that Jesus rose again from the dead was made from the very start, serving as this new religion's central idea. A passage that is thought to reflect the very earliest Christian belief, a founding Christian leader writes, "I want to remind you of the good news I proclaimed to you. Jesus died on the cross for our sins, was buried, and on the third day rose again from the dead."
Okay, here's some interesting information. I'll let that entire segment play out because it's important. They specify that miracles or instances like this take time to build into myth or legend. There's 2 points I want to make. Number 1 is that it doesn't take that long to actually build a mythical legend. And one example that actually Richard Carrier points out is the Roswell landing. Everybody knows about the Roswell landing, and it's specified to be, an actual alien craft crash landed here, and now the government developed the Illuminati and are hiding, the aliens from us. Oh, the Illuminati developed the government. Sorry, I've got my secretary over here. Thank you, Casey, for co-owner. Basically, what actually happened and what eventually developed over just a few years is radically different. So, that particular claim it doesn't hold water because, you can develop these myths and these legends and whatnot over a short period of time. You can find all these different things. Like, for instance, with Mormonism. Mormonism has the exact same situation as Christianity. Joseph Smith would be Paul, and then the angel Moroni would be the same thing as Jesus Christ. And then you've also got Scientology, where L. Ron Hubbard was in the place of Paul, and he got revealed the truth of Xenu and whatnot. So those are just a few examples of how legends and mythical things can build up over time and how people can buy them hook, line, and sinker. Now, when you think about first century, this is going to be even easier to do because people were even more gullible, considering the fact that religion back then was like you had to have religion. Like it was pretty unheard of to not have a religion or to be part of it. Not to mention the fact that they associated a religion with their social groups. That's the reason why Jews are both a race and a religion, because they are a social group that was based in Judea, Palestine, and all that. And so if you were to be a part of that group, you had to be a Jew. You had to get your dick sliced. So there's that. Hashtag blood dick oath, guys. Next, though, is that the idea of a suffering Messiah come to, get crucified, he was beaten and all of that stuff, and then he rose 3 days later. All of that was prophesied way before Jesus was supposedly on the scene. So she says that it takes thousands and thousands of years or hundreds of years, whatever, to develop these myths or legends when the idea of a suffering Messiah or suffering servant, as Isaiah puts it was already established. Now, it doesn't matter what the actual authors were referencing in those prophecies or in those statements, but we can tell that the first century Christians regarded them as prophecies of what Jesus was supposed to do. So, those are the 2 points. Myths can develop quickly, and Jesus was prophesied, or the Messiah was prophesied thousands of years before he actually supposedly arrived.
Within a very short time, this movement had taken the ancient world by storm, built on the testimony of those who claimed they had seen Jesus alive after death. There is every indication that they must have seen something.
No, there's not every indication. The Bible is mythical. It's made up. The entire resurrection thing is a combination of Abraham sacrificing Isaac, the Yom Kippur ritual, and then Daniel, the book of Daniel, when he's thrown into that lion's cave. Like, you take those three things and you can perfectly develop the exact same resurrection story. You can. That all of the major plot points and everything in the resurrection, everything that's taught in the resurrection, everything like that is contained in those 3 points. Abraham and Isaac being sacrificed up on that hill, the day Abraham was punked. And then you have Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is when you take 2 goats and you let one go and then you sacrifice the other. One carries the sins of Israel away. The other one is the blood sacrifice in order to atone for the sins. That is the crucifixion. And then Daniel has everything. It's got the suffering, it's got the persecution, and then it has the resurrection after 3 days. So, plus 3 is one of those magical numbers in the Bible.
Number 2, the earliest followers of Jesus claimed to be eyewitnesses to Jesus' resurrection and went to their deaths proclaiming it.
Okay, there are plenty of people that die for shit they know to be not true. I mean, this is not a good point. Just saying that, they died because they thought that he was that he really rose from the dead, so therefore that makes them true. No, I think that the early Christians wholly believed in the resurrection. I think that they did. I think they believed that he actually resurrected from the dead. That doesn't make it actually true, though. Just because they believed it doesn't make it true.
Now, we all know people die for their beliefs. That does not make their beliefs true. But one thing it does for all of them, it is a very strong indicator that they believed what they were saying. It's been said, liars make lousy martyrs. The early followers of Jesus claimed first to have seen Jesus die and rise again from the dead. Their deaths are an indication that they certainly believed they had. They must have seen something.
No. Well, she keeps saying that they must have seen something because that's kind of her tagline for this entire video. They must have seen something. She's not agreeing that he actually resurrected, but they're saying that they must have seen something. I just think that just because they believed something to be true and wholeheartedly believed it doesn't mean that it's actually true, which is kind of odd because she said this right before she contradicted herself. These first followers, we don't know exactly who the first followers were. We have the Gospels, which she regards as completely true, but that doesn't make them completely true. They are actually well-devised stories, parables, if you will, about, this new Christian religion and how you're supposed to act in it. Which, incidentally enough, honey, did you know that Christianity is not named after Jesus? Yeah, listen to my logic on it. Christianity is not named after Jesus because Christ is a title for Messiah, right? The one that's supposed to come and atone for sins, okay? So, Christianity is merely a religion about the Messiah contained in Jewish prophecies. Which they believe to be Jesus, but they tack on Jesus didn't have a last name. It's Jesus the Christ. Christ Jesus often is how they say it, but that's not like Jesus, Bernstein. He would have a Stein name, honey. He's Jewy. Goldstein.
Number 3. Jesus' resurrection was seen by his earliest followers and friends. But in addition, a very unusual thing happened around the same time. 2 men who were self-described skeptics, even enemies of the idea of Jesus' divinity, turned from their skepticism to claim that they had seen the resurrected Jesus. The first was Jesus' own brother James. Historians are confident that we have good information regarding James, and we know he began as a skeptic over Jesus' claims to divinity. From what we know, he appears to have thought Jesus was decidedly not the Son of God, but also that his brother was a little on the kooky side, which, if you have a brother, you may be able to relate to. But somehow, James makes a complete turnaround in his view of Jesus.
Okay, so this whole James thing is like the bane of the whole argument. Because, you see, Jesus historians want to say that or historicists, not historians, but Jesus historicists want to say that this one line in Galatians 1:19 says that James was indeed the blood brother of Christ. But you see, the problem with that is that if you go back to the Grecian, which would have been the earliest version of it, if you were to go back to that, they use a word that's actually interchangeable in that sense. It either means a person, a fellow person in a people group, or religion rather, or it means a blood brother. And the way that Paul uses it throughout all of his writings, it's interchangeable with blood brother and just somebody in the group. Right. Catholics will fight tooth and nail to say that he had absolutely no blood relatives because Mary was a perpetual virgin. So this James person, there might have been a James that I know that there's doubting Thomas. I don't know where they're getting their information about this James being a skeptic, because in Galatians he already is a Christian.
And the explanation he gives is the resurrected Jesus appeared to him. He must have seen something.
I hate her too, honey. They must have seen something. It's almost like that she's looking like wide-eyed, like they must have seen something. They had to have seen something.
Then there was a man named Saul of Tarsus. He not only did not believe in Jesus, but when the news about him began to travel, he believed this new movement was a dangerous and destructive idea. He took it upon himself to oppose believers, even violently. He had people killed and put in prison just for believing in the resurrection. Then suddenly, Saul does one of the most amazing 180s in the history of 180s. He goes from sworn enemy of the new faith to one of its most passionate and vocal promoters. What happened? According to him, the resurrected Jesus appeared to him. He went to his death, never backing off that claim. He must have seen something.
He hallucinated something. And that's just not me like making a wild assertion about shit at all. People that regularly hallucinate often gravitate towards religion because they're very much accepted in religions because of the supernatural aspect of religions. If he hallucinates and he sees something, then he had a vision. It's not that it doesn't take much to get somebody to believe, at least at the time, that you hallucinate or you had a vision of Jesus Christ. But Paul there, like he must have had some kind of a hallucination or whatnot, or maybe just a very big change of heart or something like that. Paul himself says that he persecuted Christians. I have no reason to doubt that he persecuted Christians, but at the same time, just because he chose to become a Christian doesn't mean that Jesus actually existed or that he was actually visited by the supernatural deity known as Jesus. That is not evidence at all.
Atheist New Testament scholar Jed Lublin. It must be taken as historically certain that Peter and the disciples had experiences after Jesus' death in which Jesus appeared to them as the risen Christ.
Okay, that's an appeal to authority there, I would say, because it doesn't matter that he's an atheist or anything like that. He's saying that, I'm an atheist and I'm a historian, therefore, at least that's how it's being presented to me. They must have seen something. It's that same fucking line that she's been using, right? It's fucking ridiculous, but just because he said it doesn't make it actually true. Yay, thanks, good for you, so glad that you were able to give us all those little tidbits. I would love to know what you guys think about a historical Jesus or a mythical Jesus. That would be a Jesus that was purely celestial. I would love to know what you guys think about it. I will see you heathens later. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.